Thank you all for being here. I think most of you know, but my name is Emily Cobb. I'm the police chief, and thank you for volunteering to serve on the Police Facilities Advisory Committee. We have several people here with us. I know we all have name tags, but maybe we can just go around and do a quick introduction. Again, Emily Cobb, police chief.
My name is David Keith. I'm a lieutenant with the police department. I'm a town resident. I've worked for the town. This is my 11th year, and I've been in police work for 16.
Jeff Hollinger, town resident, been here for the last 40 years.
Malika Sidmore, town resident, and I've been here for a lot of years, 25, 27.
Annie Beck, town resident. I've been a homeowner in New London for about 15 years, and my parents for 30, so been here for a while.
Ashley Seawold, I am also a town resident. I was born and raised here, left for about 25 years, but still had a lot of connections here and moved back permanently last year.
Bruce Parsons, resident, 42 years now, give or take.
Phil Sherman, I guess we're mostly residents, I am. Moved to Springfield in 1987 and over here in 1996.
Morning, Jim Casey. I'm a town resident. I also work in the town, prior law enforcement. So I do have some knowledge about police departments in different various states that I've worked in over the years. So hopefully I can bring some knowledge to this committee. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Kim Hallquist. I'm the town administrator.
Adam Ricker, I'm the town planner.
Is it on? I'm Susan Warren, and we have been permanent residents for the last 10 years, but we've been coming up for the last 30 or 40. So thank you for having me on the committee.
Good morning. I'm not a resident of New London. My name is Tony DeLuzio, and I'm with a company called Colliers International, but more specifically Colliers Project Leaders. I've been managing the design and construction of public safety facilities throughout New England for 30 years. So I'm very pleased to be here to help you all through this very complex process. My goal here is to make your volunteerism easy. So everything from meeting minutes to postings to notices, keeping us all communicating cooperatively, smoothly, and effectively is my main goal for this project. In addition to bringing all of the design and construction expertise that you will need to give you the information to make the best informed decision on behalf of the community. I am at your disposal via email and cell phone always. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. I think just a couple of quick housekeeping items. Everyone should have a copy of the initial draft or the first meeting minutes there in front of them. If you would just check your email address, make sure that's accurate. And again, I apologize to Phil Sherman because I had your email address wrong for the first week. And just making sure that that's all accurate so that we can make sure everyone gets the communication. And I noticed everyone also used the microphones, which is great because it helps with the recording for future purposes for folks who want to come and watch the meeting afterwards. So we'll be passing them back a little bit here back and forth, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem. So thank you for that. And I think I'm here to, I'm not a voting member of this committee, but I'm here to offer any sort of expertise that might be asked of me. And after we get through some of the work on the agenda here today, I would love to offer a tour to anyone who has the time today of the police department. If you don't have time today, I will make time whenever you need just to give you a really good understanding of what the police department has, what the needs are, and where it falls short in some areas, and what are some of the things that I think are most important for this committee to know about the police department and the current state of it. So without further ado, I guess I'll hand it back over to Tony.
Great, thank you, Chief. I did prepare an outline which will become the meeting minutes in our agenda. So how this works is we just keep rolling from meeting minutes becomes the next agenda becomes the next meeting minutes so that we don't lose track of stuff. And just in housekeeping, things that we close, there's a status over there, right? So we'll assign dates. We might assign action by either committee members, or mostly they roll to me right now. Until we get a design team on board, then some of those items will get divvied up. Items are generally carried on the meeting minutes for 1 week as closed, so everybody gets a copy that says the item is closed, we're moving on, the next week it goes away. New information each week will be, or each meeting will be dated, and typically anything that's new on the document is bold italic, so you can just quickly look and see what the new updated information is. Before we get into project specifics, site, design, building, status, all the project reports, as part of sending out this agenda, I did include in that a link to the town website where all of the current information and some of the past reports resides. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at that. If there are any questions, again, we can bring them up here, but you all as committee members can feel free to email me and ask any questions you have during the process. This should not be, we can only ask questions here in a meeting. We'll review the questions as part of our public meetings, but for facilitating getting things done, email me. We're not going to open up public dialogue. We're not going to have debate and communication, but I'll at least know what you're thinking. I'll prepare the answers. If I can, I'll respond not to the bigger group, but to you, or we'll bring other people into the email as needed. So part of my role, not only managing design and construction, but is to keeping you out of trouble in the open meeting laws and making sure we follow good process and protocol. The first thing that I like to cover in an initial meeting with building committees and advisory groups is how you all like to be communicated with best, right? And so we've got the emails. We did have a little bit of blip when Phil's emails were bouncing back, and I think we've corrected that, but check that, Phil, and make sure that we've got it correct. How best you would like to be communicated to is up to you. If you say, don't bombard me with 37 emails, I certainly won't do that. You know, we'll take that into consideration. The first thing on the agenda or the meeting minutes after your attendees, which will be bold italics, everybody's here, thank you for that. Is there anyone else that I'm not currently including? Somebody that's going to load to the portal the meeting minutes, a webmaster? Do these need to go to the town clerk after each meeting for posting? Just to you.
What about,
Yeah, I'll share it with everybody, yeah.
Great. How are folks with virtual meetings? If we have interim meetings in between our in-person, I'm getting some, yeah. Everybody kind of got used to it during COVID, or?
Right, but we won't be able to do that unless we have a quorum here in the room.
Okay. So committee needs to be in-person.
A quorum of this committee needs to be here in person, and then others can participate virtually, assuming the group approves of that. And then everybody can vote. Yeah, but the committee who's actually in the room would vote to allow it. And then after that, any actual votes would have to be by roll call. So it kind of slows things down a little, but it's important that everybody can see and hear what's being said and done.
And that would be Zoom as opposed to Google?
Yeah.
Great.
A quorum would be 5 then, if we have a 9-person committee? Okay, so a minimum of 5 here in one physical location. Okay. Is that able to be coordinated, excuse me, over email? That 5 members said I'll be in person, so the other 4, okay.
Yes, for public meetings, we can always coordinate dates and times. You don't have to have a whole quorum get together to coordinate the date of the time of a meeting. That, yeah, would be very cumbersome. Thoughts the group has on communicating considerations and findings and progress to the citizens. Think that would mostly be either Kim or Chief at this point. As this group goes on, if there are questions from the public that come in throughout the process, they would either probably be writing to the chief, they may post something to one of the committee members, hey, I heard you're on the committee, what's the status of such and such? That can become a cumbersome little process, so I wanted to just chat about that. If committee members get an email, somebody stops them on the street, how would you like that to come back to the group?
Should there be kind of a central repository that all questions, if an individual committee member gets a question, they should always forward it to me or whoever else? I mean, I'm fine with that, and then I'll collate them and have them all in one area. We could even look into creating, I suppose, an email address specific to this purpose, but I can talk offline with Kim about that. I guess in the interim, I would be willing to, I'll take all of those emails and make sure that they get to you.
Okay.
So that the group can then see them all.
Yeah, oftentimes when committees establish the committee and a website and people get used to or start drilling into the document portal, there's somewhere for them for questions, click here.
I see, yep.
Who should that go to first? And generally it goes to town administrator or chief to say, this is a question really, Tony, the design team,
Okay.
This is a question for the committee. What was the committee thinking on XYZ decision? You know, how do we want to address that? Because there may be questions from the public that come up outside of the public meeting. So just, you
those
don't
can
have
all-
to answer it today. It's on the meeting because it often happens, and I wanted to just start that conversation so that you all are thinking about it. Any questions on communications, concerns? You all have my contact information. So that's the best start right there, because then we can direct traffic, as I'm often considered traffic control for all this process. Next is the study's findings and how we got to where we are today. So as I said in my earlier email, I shared the link with you. Yes, Phil?
Over the first issue on project goals, I'm not totally clear as to
Oh,
what this committee is trying to accomplish. Advisory, who are we advising?
so you are advising, if I'm correct, the select board, which will be ultimately the authority having jurisdiction in making decisions, right? Any recommendations, the committee would be working as and voting on a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen for payment of an invoice, for site consideration, for designer consideration. Station should be bigger, smaller, those types of questions that are going to come up through our process. You are advisory to the select board. Our goal overall is to facilitate the renovation and/or new construction of a police facility. Right now, we've still been playing that either/or game. There's been studies done on both options. There's been a previous site selection committee that was put together, and then there was a more recent site consideration matrix put together. It was presented through several public meetings. A number of sites rose to the highest ranking, if you will. I understand at least one of those has been taken off the table. The owner has just taken that option off the table, and we'll go through that a little bit more. But the goal is to recommend to the select board either renovation, addition, or new construction for a police facility.
And are we starting cold and realizing we have pages and pages and hours of work that's been done to this point? But from the purposes of this committee, we're starting without preconceived decisions being made?
Correct. At this point, we do not have a resolution that you're managing to. We've gone through the Harriman report, we've gone through the David Myers report. We've gone through and redid an assessment of the site selection, as I talked about. You, the town, I say, the town now has multiple proposals from new designers, and that request for design proposal was to, again, study the existing conditions, leaking and as bad as they may be. What is the option, and how would a project of that magnitude impact the current station facility, site, expansion, parking in the area, traffic, all those things? We can look at that. And as an alternative, we have identified in there that the selected design firm would prepare concept diagrams of what a single-story and two-story police facility might look like, so that we have some idea if it's 10,000 square feet and we have to go to a much smaller restricted site, what would that two-story look like? If we happen to find a site that's larger and we want to keep it all on a single floor, what would that look like? So there's different cost parameters to each of those. Right now, we've got it set up that RFP is flexible in both of those regards, and we're looking for this committee to review those proposals and weigh in on that selection process. That's almost like our first big recommendation of the select board would be, you all have read through those documents, understand the RFP, we worked through that process. What would your recommendation be?
Fair enough.
Use your microphone. Use your microphone.
Oh.
That's okay.
I just want to make myself understand and maybe get us all to the same page that this is based on a preconceived decision that the existing building, to use your words, is bad.
I think in its current state, I hope there's not a whole lot of disagreement that it's not adequate in a lot of ways. I think, well, anyway, I guess I shouldn't say that, but there's a lot of areas that building doesn't meet current needs.
So I don't know some of the people in this committee, but
certainly.
I imagine that some of us know an awful lot about the history of this building.
Mm-hmm.
I was the chair of the Bucher analysis, and others may never have been in the building or heard
Yep.
your side or opposite sides of the discussion. I'd like to know whether we're starting with a decision that the existing building is bad, or whether we're basically starting with do we have a problem here, and if so, what's the problem?
So I think to that point, from our broader goal, moving to that studies and findings, you've got two studies already prepared for the town that identify the deficiencies of the building for its current use, right? This room that we're in is a beautiful room. It was a great renovation, fine building. For the purpose of a police station and a regional communications hub of that significance in the facility, part of the facility that it's in, it is deficient for the next 25 years of operations. That's not something that I've determined today or the chief has determined. The town has hired two other entities to come in and study what those deficiencies are. Now, how you resolve those deficiencies, either in renovation or new construction, that decision has not been made. That is what this committee is going to help recommend to the select board. As you all know, whether you're renovating your house or you're building a new house, you're either going to live through a renovation, you're going to be somewhat limited in any renovation project as to what you can renovate. Costs of renovations are sometimes more expensive because of the difficulty and the phasing and the timing and the operations of renovations versus building new. But building new, you oftentimes have site costs, site constraints that will shift a project's cost and schedule. Those are all the things that are going to be brought before this group in a manner that hopefully provides you the information to make those decisions and recommendations to the select board. Is that good? So that next section, studies, findings, and how we got here, is really what we're talking about. So Phil, don't feel like you're commanding or leading us off in a different direction. It's important that folks read those documents, look through it, ask questions about the findings, because there are many people, since I've been coming to town over the past 6 months, there's a lot of debate over new addition, renovation, who's ultimately making that decision. Do we believe everything in each of these reports as it's written? And it's up to you all as a community to weigh those findings in making that recommendation. But the reports, each of them had good and maybe not so accurate information. Some of the information was really time sensitive. So when you do a report on an existing facility and it's 5 years old and you haven't done any real maintenance or upgrades or renovations in that 5 years, some of those items deteriorate even more than they were. Others, you're now doing a project. So if you're renovating the bathrooms or you're making mechanical or plumbing changes to the building, were the deficiencies of those previous studies considered in any maintenance or repairs since the time of that study? If you've spent that time and money, spent the time preparing for those renovations or maintenance repairs, it would have been prudent to look at those reports to say, oh, that HVAC unit only has 3 years of its usable life left. Why are we replacing motors, shivs, filters, and controls instead of just buying a new unit, right? So I don't know that any of that has occurred. You as a committee coming together to help with these decisions don't know if any of that has occurred. But by you going through these studies saying, hey, select board, what have we done to resolve some of these deficiencies that were pointed out in report number 1, validated in report number 2? Now we're about to bring in a consultant engineering firm, architectural engineering firm, to do report number 3. And I would assume that those deficiencies, most of them haven't been resolved or addressed. Have they gotten worse, and have new deficiencies cropped up? Have other components of the building failed or gotten worse since those reports? So oftentimes we get committees that, why do we just keep doing report after report after report saying the same thing? That's what I'm looking for this group to address.
I might add just one thing to that. So the reports start in 2014 with the first Myers report, which was more an existing conditions survey of both parts of the building. There was extensive work done on Bucher and Whipple in the interim. I don't remember the years, it was before my time. So when you read those reports, which were studies, there in fact has been $1 million+ put into this complex in the interim. And that's not reflected in those reports at this point, anyway.
Is it part of our responsibility as a group, should we advise, or even in the process of discussing, that it's up to us to come up with what could that building be used for, what should that building be used for if a new police station is a decision?
I would defer that to Kim.
That's not currently the charge of this committee, no.
I think it's important to note, Phil, that you make a good point of that $1 million, give or take, that has been spent on this building since then. And those items were for infrastructure that's unrelated to police functioning on a daily basis, essentially. And it's in terms of I think it was $600,000 for mold remediation, water infiltration, and HVAC. So just to offer that while those are important, it was making an uninhabitable building, quote unquote, inhabitable. So as far as our daily operations go, there hasn't been a whole lot that's different. One piece that is different is we expanded the dispatch center into the next room. But we'll go over that when I give the tour, so I can kind of tell you about it and explain it as we're over there.
And if you look at the RFP for the current study report, you'll see in there, it provided the design firms that are responding access to both the Harriman report and the Myers report. Part of their charge, whichever firm we hire to do this next study, would be to go and capture all of that updated information, what's been repaired, what's been replaced. So there is a value of that third report 10 years after the first one, what has changed. So the next topic on our agenda is site considerations. There was a previous site selection panel. There was a more recent one, as I said, since I've been engaged here. The site matrix is up on the website. We identified, I think, 11 sites in town that were of consideration. There was a weighting and a ranking of those sites by geography, topography, acreage, size, setbacks, all of the things that you would look at when considering what is typically referred to as an essential facility, right? Police and fire and emergency communications have a different hierarchy in site selection than a retail space or one of our other types of clients, a more office space. So we want to typically make sure there's a couple means of egress and access available, so that should one entry be blocked for some reason, we want to make sure there's good separation between public vehicles, visitors coming to the police facility versus emergency responders, right? There's some separation that happens there. There's some secure areas. There might be an impound area. So we look at the ability of a particular site to meet those parameters, and those are all in that matrix for you. Green, and typically, not just sticking with police and street signage, but green is good. Yellow is there might be some cautionary. We think there's ledge. We think there's some wetlands. Yellow would indicate on that site matrix, not that it's impossible, but it might take a little bit more engineering. It might have a little bit different cost impact to using that site. If it's ledge, we're probably not going to have a lower level, right? But we can pin the ledge and maybe it's a 2-story building. Or if it's a bigger site, that's a good reason to stick with a single floor slab on grade. Do we have means of egress, vehicular egress, or do we need an easement over some other piece of property? So there's different ways to look at those sites that are coded in yellow so that you understand what the background is on those. And as you read them, throw me questions. And then there were red that either because it's not currently town-owned, it's an expensive piece of property, it's very sloping, it says it's 8 acres, but 6 of it's wetland, and there's really no accessibility, different things like that that would trigger us to kind of categorize that as a non-starter. That information was presented at public meeting. There was no determination that, yes, that is our best site. So again, that would fall back to this committee as we go forward to give the chosen architect, design firm, one or two of those sites. Again, we're asking them to evaluate this building. We're asking them to evaluate and show us a concept of a one-story and a two-story building. They also, in that RFP, in their proposal, own providing you a test fit of 2 or 3 sites. I think it's 3, where they would say, okay, if that is your preferred site, it would be most conducive to a 2-story or a 1-story, and what that might look like from the outside. So they will give you elevations and concept designs that it fits the context of the neighborhood, wherever it might be going. It's not, obtrusive to anybody. And that will allow us to then put dollars to that and say, okay, if that were ultimately the site, here's what that building would cost. So it's a combined effort to provide all that information.
Tony? Emily? All the sites listed seem to be Main Street. Is that specifically a request? That's really what you want? Is that best for the police department, best for the town?
That was a big takeaway from the police station site selection subcommittee that happened in 2022-ish, the last one, when 21? Okay. Is the Main Street Newport Road corridor, is that for our town, the right thing I think a lot of people felt would be for the police department to be a visible presence on our Main Street, so to speak, which I think includes that Newport Road corridor. So that's why you'll see a lot of these sites on Main Street. I don't know that we should rule anything out at this point for the committee, but that was one of the biggest takeaways that I heard from the site selection subcommittee, was that people felt it was important for it to be on that main corridor.
I ask that because I've always felt that the Sewer Lagoon land, a large piece of land that we own, it's across from the highway department, so it's an area where the town has established itself, it just seems ideal to me.
And some of that consideration, I think, will be the elevation of that site, and if we'll be able to reach the towers on Mount Kearsarge and Mount Sunapee, because we'll be putting additional equipment on Mount Sunapee this year, hopefully. So elevation is a consideration if we can have line of sight to those areas. So.
Say, are you working from a dollar figure backwards, where you are deciding we have this amount of money, or are you going into this with, the thought that, whatever the design gives us? Because sometimes it's, if you have X amount of dollars, that is going to limit your location, your size, and what you can do. And I think sometimes going into a project that way helps mold expectations as far as what is going to be, available from a price standpoint of view. Have we looked at it that way?
No, the Board of Selectmen, to my knowledge, haven't dedicated this project will only spend X amount of dollars. And I think it's important for the committee to consider if property A costs, $1 million, is that more than the committee might want to spend on a piece of property? Maybe, but what's the value of that property, the location, and will this address the needs of the police department for decades to come? So there hasn't been, in my experience or knowledge, a dedicated dollar amount to this project, because it's certainly about the cost, but it's also about what the value of a piece of property might be if we were to move away, in addition to renovate.
Are there any of the pieces of property that are under consideration that could possibly be donated to the town? Has that been looked at by donated by the owner if there is an owner and it's not town-owned?
I think that's always a possibility.
Yes.
If anyone listening wants to donate town property to the town.
You'd be surprised.
Sure.
So, having dealt with that kind of thing, there's, for someone to donate their piece of property for a beautiful new police station, and maybe that is the New London Police Station, but it's the so-and-so, the Smith Building or whatever, They like that.
I think the Board of Selectmen probably would look real hard at that and determine if it meets the needs and if it would kind of address our needs for now and long into the future. So you raise a great point.
Could get you out of a few tickets, too, down the road.
Whatever works.
I see you speeding through town, To the point of budget, we have not been constrained, I'll say, by budget or restricted. We understand from the previous reports, both Harriman and Myers, and what that project is. We have developed kind of high-low project budget, which has also been shared with the town based on recent project experience, similar size, similar topography, similar demographics, what we see those facilities fitting into. This one's a little unique from, a small community police facility because of the aspect of the regional communication. So we did take that into consideration, but we're not restricting the design team to a budget right now, and we really don't know kind of where we're headed. It would be good for this group not to be restrained as well.
The only problem with that is if the town is expecting to spend $10 million and we come up with a $20 million design, that can be a big waste of everybody's time. And I think it's important that we understand, from a dollar standpoint of view, what the town is interested in spending. And again, when I talk about the town, the taxpayers are willing to spend and then come up with the best possible design to fit that budget. And, this has been going on a long time. And I think part of that has been, we've got prices up here and expectations down here. So I do think it's important that we set expectations with what we need for a facility, along with what is the community willing to spend. And that, to me, that just makes sense. All of us are busy people, and I don't think anybody wants to be here 10 years from now on our 5th or 6th. Emily, I take my hat off for you, the fact that, you're still smiling when you sit here. We got to get something done, and let's go about it the most intelligent way possible.
And that's why I think what we've worked on to date in developing the next design study is different than the Harriman and the Myers report, in that the deliverables will give you a plan and a budget for a renovation that fits this site, this building, and it's probably going to be the lowest cost, right? It may not be the best value, but it may be the lowest cost. 1-story, 2-story, this site or that site. I think at the end of that process, this committee will be able to, throughout the town, advocate for, this is our best option in town. We understand what it's going to do to our tax bracket. We understand what it's going to cost the taxpayers. We understand what it's going to provide in a facility for the next 25 years. And that's why you're all here, is to do exactly that, Jeff.
So Jeff's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think I hear you completely. I think as I come into this committee, and I am also a project manager, and oftentimes when I lead projects, is the end goal is coming up with a few options for them to respond to say, hey, for $10 million, here's what you're going to get. for 20 million, here's what we could get. What worries me about figuring out what the budget is now is I'm not sure that our citizens are equipped to say, I only want to spend 20 million, I only want to spend 5 million, without understanding what will that get them. So presenting options, in my mind, is probably the best route. And maybe that is the plan, is to come up with a few different.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but one thing that might help is both the existing space that's available and the new space that's proposed are within 10% of each other. We're fundamentally talking about the same amount of real estate, interior space. That tells me that the budget comes and goes with fits and finishes and, you know, the sort of quality, if you will, of what's in the box, not so much the size of the box. So that can evolve as the process proceeds, and maybe we do get some better sense of dollars. I'm not convinced that renovating is going to be much cheaper than new. I'm not sure that's really the issue, but we'll see.
Good. Okay. Existing facilities, we've kind of been talking about that. But again, I wanted to drop back, see if anybody's read the reports, had any questions regarding that and understanding. The chief is going to give a tour of the facility afterwards. Are there any questions? Is there anything you believe or don't believe in the previous reports or limitations? You know, to the point of providing the options and what a budget might be. Oh, sorry, I wasn't on the recording here. I'd go out on the limb and say, regardless of what the budget limit might be perceived, there are going to be some that I've encountered that are going to vote on staying where it is in the existing building with as little renovation as possible. And that's not just here in New London. That's in every community I work in. It's good enough. I dial 911, they respond. What's in a new building for me other than what they get? And that it just happens everywhere, Jeff. There are others that may have a history with law enforcement, may be of a better understanding of what the limitations of the building are, that said, yep, that's horrible conditions, we need to give them better. You're going to find both of those. And it's always, you know, trying to deal with the law of thirds, right? 1/3 doesn't want to spend anything. 1/3 is very supportive of schools and new buildings and townwide infrastructure. And the other third is swayable. And we've got to, you know, kind of do our homework and prove out what the best option for this community is, and understanding that this community serves other communities as well in the regional comm center.
That actually was one of my thoughts, and I don't think this was in that report, but correct me if I'm wrong, I may have missed it, but the liability piece here of what is their liability? We do handle dispatch for 2 or 3 other towns?
5 total.
5 other, yeah.
And the ambulance service.
Yeah, in the event that there is something that happens here, because of the facilities, what is the liability on the town? Is there a chance that we could be sued by other towns because our facility is not adequate and something happened and we weren't able to handle dispatch for other towns? And I don't think there's anything in there about liability, but it's on my mind.
Yeah, I cannot speak to that. I doubt any of the architects, either in our current batch or Harriman, and I've worked with Harriman, I haven't worked with Myers before, but they wouldn't address that type of town legal issue. What I can tell you is I've seen happen is not from town to town, but eventually your own police firefighters, having lived through study after study for 10, 15 years, finally decide the town's never going to do anything. So you know what? Our union's going to file a grievance. And that, it's not where any police or fire department wants to go. That's just not how those first responders, emergency service folks, they don't jump to that as an immediate reaction. It takes a long time. But when it happens, you're going to have to deal with it. And the cost and the process become a little different to control when you're put in that position as a community.
Piggybacking on this conversation of we are the communications for several towns, is there any expectation that other towns might give to this project?
The other towns contribute to the operating budget by way of their call for service average over a 3-year period. So they contribute to our operating budget. And so I haven't heard, though, of any other contributions aside from their contribution, their payment every year annually for dispatching services for contribution to this project. But regardless, I think it's important that to know there was a study for the dispatching center itself in 2014, I believe, whether the town should continue to operate a dispatch center or whether they should go outside of town for dispatching services, have somebody else answer the phone. And the result of that was that the town wants a dispatch center here in town, and I think the select board have been supportive over the years that that the town will maintain a dispatch center because the people here in town enjoy that service. So I guess I just think it's important to note that the town would have that dispatching center, but I haven't heard of other towns contributing to this project specifically. It's not to say we couldn't ask.
Condo assessment. Okay. So does darn it. Sorry. So at this point, the town does have proposals from architectural design and engineering firms to update the study, prepare the plans and the elevations that we talked about, review the site selection matrix that was developed, and work with myself and Colliers to prepare the costs, high, low, probable costs for each of those options for you. So at the end of that study phase, you would have multiple options, as Ashley mentioned, on what different sites would look like, what this existing building would be able to support in a renovation, what those costs might be. But right now, we're sitting, we've got the designer proposals, they've been submitted to the town. We have been communicating with those firms that this group was coming up to speed, being put together, and that we would be back to them shortly. So that's kind of like the next big step in this process, is having you all become comfortable with those design firms, ask questions. Do you want to interview them? Do you want them to come here physically and do an interview? You know, could you do online interviews? We've done those through COVID, and we continue to do them here and there. I'm a personal kind of guy. I like being here in the room. I know it's a challenge for, not for you all, but for some of us, and certainly for some of the designers. But I think when you are hiring an architect, and I would tell you this commercially or at home, it's a person or an entity or firm that you're going to work with very closely It's like picking your doctor. They're going to be sitting with us at the table. They're going to be going through your building. They're going to become part of your town. They need to understand the fabric of the community in order to make a building that supports your community and fits into your neighborhood. Bring them to the table and hear them out, see them. If you're going to spend the next, year and a half, 2 years working closely with somebody, don't do it over a Zoom selection. It might work out well, it might not. Get to know the folks. I know all of them. I've worked with all of them, and they're good people, and they're happy to come here and do that. So that would be the next step in designer selection.
Tony, are those posted, the RFP and the proposals, or how do we
Are they not?
access them?
No, not yet.
So are they going to be distributed by email, or, okay.
Yes. I guess they are public document, right?
Selectmen haven't looked at them yet. They were waiting for this group to decide what they want to do. So once they're distributed to this group, they'll be posted online. Anybody can look at them.
Distribution of the submissions, yes.
I want to mention one more quick thing while Tony's typing about cost and the communication center in particular and other things about other towns contributing. I am not afraid to apply for grants through either the state or federal means. And so there are grants available for certain aspects of projects like an emergency operations center, but especially a dispatch center like ours that is regional. When those types of projects have a bigger impact than perhaps just one single entity, sometimes that might put you a little bit more ahead in terms of grant funding and allocation. So I hadn't applied for any sort of grant opportunities specific to the building or an emergency operations center at this point yet because we were still kind of in an unknown. We were in limbo, and I don't want to apply for money that I don't know that the town is going to use. So I just say that going forward, that as we kind of start to narrow this down a little bit and it might take a little bit more shape, I would absolutely be willing to apply for any sort of grants that I possibly can for any piece of this project. Even if it's $50,000 here or $1 million there, any little bit helps. So I would just offer that out to the group. And David said he would write the grant application.
Thank you for volunteering yet again. There's very little in the way of police, fire-specific grants for individual community buildings. There's SAFER and other police grants, and there's some things like that we'll look at. There's energy rebates and green initiative things that we'll look at, further down the road. That is part of the process. Communications technology, there's usually a few floating around out there as well. Mm-hmm. To that point, as budget and finance, we have developed the high-low probable budget. It's available on the portal, I believe. I seen that it was there. If it's not, I can certainly get it out to everyone. We oftentimes, in smaller communities, hear the opinion that it's just a bigger house. It's X amount of square feet and so. Police, fire, again, regional comms, they are categorized by the building code as essential facilities. They need to be the last building standing and the last building operating in a natural event that might happen, storm, whatever. They are built to different categories of structural rigidity. They have emergency communications backup, signal backup, full generator building capacity, so they tend to be higher in cost. They're more complex to build. They're built to a higher standard. And so once folks start thinking of it not as a bigger house, we can understand some of the complexities of the types of construction that we're dealing with. And that's not even getting into police facilities that have detention facilities and 3-4 cells and things that we are engaged in. I was recently at a police trade show, and some of the chiefs have come up and said, geez, you did my station 20 years ago. We now need to go into the locker rooms and look a little differently at gender-neutral toilets, and we need to redo our public lobby. And so there's things that have changed in our world that affect public buildings and affect police and fire stations and how they operate and how they're designed and how they're constructed. But you're in a good position, I'll say. You've got a good choice of designer selections, a good choice of design firms that are up on those things. I'll say you've got a good choice in a project management firm that deals in these issues every day. 80% of my work right now is either police, fire, or combined facility. So it's having folks that are entrenched in those day-to-day operational issues, helping inform and bring that information to the table and to you all. And it certainly affects budgets and financing. But just as we talked earlier about, donations of land, that would certainly be a positive impact on budget. Other folks do fundraising for furniture, fixtures, equipment. There are things that can come up throughout a project. Oftentimes when we get to, if we were building a new building, landscaping is something that we often hear as a donatable item, or we're going to get the local tech school to help out. Simple things, the flagpole is usually a dedicated, donated item from somebody that says, hey, my father used to be on the force, I'll buy the pole, put a plaque on it, those kind of things. So as we go through this very elaborate budget process, we're going to look at every one of those items, and we're going to bring that information to you to make those decisions or to make the reach out to the public. There is always an opportunity to donate to your community, right? There's my little public service announcement.
Tony?
Yes.
Question. Emily, we're looking at possibly a new police facility somewhere in town. We've talked about renovating the existing. Has anyone thought of and looked at demolishing everything from the back of this building forward and building new here?
That was part of the Harriman study, I believe, in 2018, but some of that included purchasing the land next door. So I think that has been looked at, but certainly if anything, this side of Whipple was going to be demolished, the selectmen would take that under very heavy consideration, I think, but.
And there's a restriction
on the land.
On the other side?
Yes, we can't go any further onto the town green.
Right.
Yep.
But one of the things we could do is increase square footage by going up, which we never did. Jeff and I were both here in town, Ashley as well, when the first edition for then Town Hall went on. And I can remember sitting in meetings and saying, for the cost of going to a two-story building, why don't we go to a two-story building? Well, we didn't. And we've been adding on to it and adding on to it ever since. And,
Yeah.
Is it worth looking at initially at least to say, yes, we have a limited footprint.
Yep.
We have other limited footprints as well, some of the other pieces of land. What could we do with it?
I think that would be part of the analysis that the design firm does with looking at Bucher, the existing. What would it be to leave the walls where they are, or what would it be to tear them all down and build new on this site?
Great. Yeah, definitely if you can build one foundation, one roof, the other space isn't free, but it's less, right? So good value on square footage.
I have an odd question, because it's, community is so close right here, the neighborhoods. Is your firing range right on site,
No, that's down off of Mountain Road.
on the mountain road?
Yes.
Because a lot of departments have it on site, and I'm familiar with that. So I just wanted to find out, because I was looking at the property that abuts next door, and I knew that wouldn't be appropriate.
Right. Yeah, no, it's off-site.
And would stay that way?
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I think once you start
Indoor
talking about-
ranges
yeah,
are
indoor
quite
ranges.
expensive.
It's a lot.
but could certainly be an option to look at and provide you that kind of price analysis. So the last thing really, other than open discussion, is schedule. I would guess that we can get the RFPs distributed pretty quickly for everyone to look at. Take a few weeks to go through it, try to figure out whether we want to invite 1, 2, 3 firms for interview, or what you would feel comfortable with and when, and hopefully get that selection recommendation to the Board of Selectmen in about 4 weeks. Study phase, they've all kind of outlined 8 to 10 weeks to do their work of review the existing studies, put together the program, the schematics, kind of put together those concepts. And, is that a realistic goal for this committee? I know that this is not your full-time job as it is mine, so we need to take that into consideration. I think the one thing when I put in meeting notes about setting realistic goals and expectations, you all have to help me help you, right? And the things that communities start to stress over is the committee's taken too long. They've had this information. What are they doing? Why aren't they meeting? There's no consistency. There's no forward progress. And right away, we start getting, the tomatoes cast at us. If we can show that we are working productively, we're working in an effective manner, we're following a prescribed outline of process, it will build confidence. It will build the community support for the project. It will build community support for the time and effort that you all are volunteering and giving up. And that's huge. At the end of the day, they're listening to you in the public, they're meeting you on the street, they're seeing your engagement, they're seeing your involvement. You want to maintain that support, and you want to build that confidence that this group is working effectively on their behalf. So if you say, hey, we talked about it, and we don't have to decide today, 6 weeks, there's summer coming, there's vacations, there's all kinds of things that happen in your lives. I will always dictate the most strict time frame in the quickest order, because that's what you pay me to do, basically, right? You want me to drive the schedule, let's get things done. You need to pull the reins back on me and say, hey, 4 weeks is nice, but we need more, or whatever it might be. So I will try to push you along. Don't be afraid to push back and say that's not going to work for us. So. And with that,
Do you have suggestions on the scheduling of committee meetings? Are we trying to do it bi-weekly, or is it going to be a regular schedule? Or
so I think if we were to, it will vary throughout the process. It is really the answer to that. There are times when we will need to meet every other week. There might be times where, okay, we don't need to meet for 4 weeks. If we take the designer selection, today we're sitting here, it's Friday, I don't see why everybody can't have that in their mailbox, Monday, end of day Monday, or loaded to the portal. Kim can say, no, she's out the next 3 days and you're not going to get it until Wednesday if that's the case. I think 2 weeks to review it. Let's get back on a meeting. And you tell me, hey, we've read it all. We don't like any of this. We like it. Let's get XYZ firms in here. Let's pick a date. And we'd need to do that. Give them at least a week to kind of shine up their portfolio of stuff that they want to present. And then whether we plan that to be, okay, we're going to do 3 interviews. They're a half an hour each. We're going to stay for an hour after that and then make a decision and a discussion. That's the kind of process. Or, we meet with 3 firms, everybody goes away for a week, we come back the following week, everybody, puts their consensus on the table. When does that fall in correlation to a select board meeting? A little bit of calendar juggling there, because we want your recommendation to go kind of efficiently. We don't want to see another whole 2 weeks pass by just for a select board recommendation. But again, the select board might take your recommendation under advisement and kick it a week, right? Because it's a big decision that we're making. So I think if that's a schedule thing that you want to talk about here, happy to keep going through that process. If not, I would say 2 weeks. If everybody can have a review of the proposals, that would be great.
I don't know about the rest of your calendars, but for me, it would be better to schedule a routine meeting and cancel it if we don't need it, and just look out, and whether it's an every 2-week thing, and then, ditch it if we don't need it.
I can certainly send a reoccurring every 2 weeks for the next 8, 10 weeks, and we can cancel as you need. Oftentimes, that's easier for towns to post that, right? One sheet, here's when they're meeting, everybody in the public will then know, okay, hey, every 2 weeks, Friday morning, come on out.
How does Friday mornings work for people? I have a conflict on the second Friday of each month. I could do afternoons, but not morning.
I think it would depend. I think if we're trying to keep these meetings to an hour, then I think, a Friday morning is fine. I think if there are going to be times when we need to meet longer, I'm not sure that the middle of a workday is going to work for me on a continual basis. That's just a lot of ask.
Same thing here.
Yeah.
Would there be any interest in, rather than meeting at 10, meeting at 9,
Yeah.
meeting at 8:30? Earlier is usually
Yeah.
a little
This was
easier.
purely just thrown out into the universe this Friday at 10 time,
Yes.
so we are not committed to
Okay,
this
I just,
at all.
Yeah, earlier is great.
Yeah.
In deference to people who have to work for a living, is evenings better than daytime? Or?
First and third Fridays?
okay. And you're going to send out a meeting
Yep.
invite?
First and third Fridays, 8:30.
So we'll try to get
There's
the,
no other schedule conflict with this room, or
I don't
is that
think so on
something we
Friday
need to-
mornings. No.
And they'll
concern
always
about?
be
If it is, we'll kick them out.
in this room, so on time.
Fair enough, yes.
Where'd you go, Jeff? Did you go to the town office?
Same time.
Yes, and I mean,
8:30.
you sent,
8:30.
and I mean, you even sent an email.
Bring your
saying
coffee.
Where it was, but
Put a notice on the door downstairs, just in case anyone went to the training room, and, yeah.
still,
Call it.
Earlier is
okay.
better.
all right.
You're not alone.
8:30.
So we'll try to get those RFPs out to email, certainly by.
They might be too large to email. I'll try to email them, but
Yeah.
before the end of the day, they'll be posted online. I'll either individually email them, all three, to each of you. If it's too big, I'll point you to where it is on the web. And if anybody wants paper copies, some people don't like online, just let me know, and we'll have those available as well.
I think we had some delivered, right?
Yep.
5.
But if any others, if there's too, we can just photocopy them.
Okay.
At some point, do we assume that we would be touring potential sites?
I think so, yep. Perhaps once we get beyond the designer firm selection piece, then I think we would take a look at what sites are still available at this point in time and have a talk with the property owners if they're not already town-owned and see if they're amenable to the facility touring that site.
Yeah, I think look at the matrix that's online and let me know if you have questions or concerns about any site specifically. Again, you may know more about the particular site than I do. I did a few drive-bys, some Google mapping, endangered species mapping, and what I could find online from GIS records, but you all may know these sites with a little more in-depth knowledge than I do.
So hopefully if the committee can have a look at the RFPs by the next meeting on May 17, that's what I have
Yep.
for folks, okay. am ready to give the grand tour if there's nothing else. Oh, excuse, public? Oh, Joe. Well, I'm not running the meeting. Sorry, it's not my meeting.
Who's running it?
Looks like there's public comment. I guess I would throw it out to the committee. If the committee would like to engage the public and allow for public comment, then yes. Come on up, Joe.
I've got to run real quick. I know the clock's got to get
Just turn your mic on.
time. I'm encouraged by the group that's here. This is, let me take this off. I know I'm bald, but here we go. I'm encouraged that we've got a great cross-section. There's some institutional knowledge. People have been here for years, bringing a lot to the table. And you will have a lot to consider. I mean, I encourage you all to engage with everyone in the community. Listen. There's ideas. There's things I haven't thought of. There's things that others will think of. Actually bringing up, liability. I never thought about that in a dispatch center. Do we need 2 people on dispatch instead of 1 for liability purposes? All those things, there'll be new things that come up. Tony, don't worry about it. If they throw tomatoes, you and I will make a great gravy on Sunday, right? Okay, so they're not going to throw too many tomatoes. But there are some opportunities out there. Whether we stay here, I'll be the first one to say, a new site here, the police deserve something, right? And I'm encouraged that this committee will figure that out, encourage it, and find something. Just 1 or 2 things I want to throw out there. Susan, is that right? She mentioned something about donations, things like that. Things have changed, right? We may not get a donation, but I do try to factor in what has changed in the last 10 years, 20 years. I was on a site selection committee. We looked hard. One of the buildings we looked at was the TDS building, knowing that it's so underutilized because technology has changed, right? Would that be a great location across from the police station? Good, bad, or indifferent? It's only the emergency services that can speak to whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, not me, all right? So something to look at, something to think about. But just on one point that I think I've heard in the community, and again, only the police can talk about this, is technology has changed. We did a survey in 2014, it was just said, about dispatch. What's changed? Technology has changed. The number of people, the number of towns we were serving in 2014 is different than the number of towns we are serving today. It continues to decrease. It becomes a question. It becomes a discussion point on whether you, need to run this as a profit center, how we do it, can we staff it and run it as a profit center, or will we continue to lose people who are participating in our dispatch center? I'm not asking for answers right now, but these are things to talk about. Listen, they're called unforeseen consequences for a particular reason. You can't predict the future. We're going to see some things, right? I'll be the first to stand on my soapbox again and say, it's unfortunate the town of New London purchased that little piece of land next to the New London Inn at the time they purchased it. We took a piece of commercial property off the page. It's handcuffed the New London Inn for parking and any potential, but that's hindsight now. We could look back at that and say, can we undo it or not do it? So your challenge is to say 2 or 3 or 4 years from now, could we have foreseen some of those things? And the dispatch, to me, becomes the biggest thing because I think it's an important component to what you're going to build or renovate. A buddy of mine once said, you do not build a church for Easter Sunday, right? If you're doing that, you're building a mausoleum that's, 50,000 square feet, right? So we do have to, as a group, try to figure out what our needs will be in the future. And so I think that dispatch thing really does need to be looked at hard and say, where are we going with this? Is it something that we could have foreseen that says, you know what? We've seen some of the participants who are in our regional dispatch move to Hanover, move to Laconia, move to other places. Has technology evolved enough that says, is it something we should be considering in this discussion so we are designing and building the right thing for the police going forward? And again, I just wanted to throw that out there. There'll be plenty of other things like that. And the only way to learn about those things is keeping your ears to the pavement. This group, I can grab David when he's running by the house and have a conversation. You know, as much as we talk about the college and the hospital are such important assets, equally as important are the assets of our emergency services. Hospital is great, college is great, but our fire and police are important. So we'll get it right this time. I'm encouraged that we'll figure out something. But ask all the questions, listen to what you're hearing on the street. If it's not always in line with what you're thinking, there are some valid points. Again, things we don't think about, like what Ashley brought up with liability. Technology has changed. The way you do your police work now is different than I'm sure people did it 20 years ago. So trying to get a handle on that. Thank you. Good luck with the project.
I think Joe raises a great point. I mean, we've made some great investments in our dispatch center over the past few years, including when the town supported hiring a 5th full-time dispatcher a few years ago. And certainly with one of the grants that we just applied for and received, we've got a new software program that affects not only the town of New London, but all of the towns that we dispatch for. So we've made some great investments in that dispatch center, remembering that the charge of this committee is to advise the selectmen on police facility, where it's going to be, what it's going to look like, not necessarily if we should keep or do anything different with the dispatch center, but what that looks like, incorporating that into our police department. So I think Joe raises a great point about that. And just, you'll see when we go over there the changes that we've made recently to accommodate some of the needs of how technology has changed. Now all of our information will be cloud-based storage instead of servers on site, which is costly. And if you'd have told me when I started almost 20 years ago, I'd be talking about servers and cloud-based, and I would not have believed you, so.
Just building on what Emily said, I just jotted down 5 things that are not within the purview of this committee, nor probably should they be. However, they're within the purview of the conversations that's going outside these 4 walls. First is the elephant in the room, and that's what do you do with 9,300 square feet of empty space in Bucher if you move? Nobody's going to tear it down. Somebody's going to fill it up. Second is the communications issue. That's real estate, if nothing else, to this committee. One of the things the Building and Facilities Committee tried, and with no luck, was to get their arms around the future trajectory of growth in this town. It is like looking at a black garbage bag. Nobody knows where this town is going, population-wise. The New London Fire Department is already penciling in little additions to the side in case they have to take over the ambulance service, penciling in raising the roof on an existing building when their ladder truck wears out. That's all happening outside of here. And lastly is what I'll call the gentle destruction of Main Street. Newport Road is not Main Street any more than Exit 9 is downtown Warner. It's over there. Main Street is here. And the more the government leaves Main Street, the more everybody else leaves it. How many people here have gone to downtown Warner lately? Nobody, because there's nothing there. So good, bad, or otherwise, the more the municipalities vacate for Newport Road, the more everybody else does also. When we moved here, there were 2 hardware stores, blah, 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 gas stations and everything else, right? All gone. So some of that's progress, and some of it is governments. If they don't stay on Main Street, neither does anybody else. Anyway, those are all things that are part of this bigger conversation that's going to continue, I think, out in the town while we're busy dealing with our more narrow scope.
Go ahead, Tony.
I have nothing else. I
Anything
think
else?
those are good points, Phil. And I think the community at large would expect that this group take those things into consideration as part of this.
But I'm hearing, at least in terms of the Bucher reuse, that that's not within our purview.
But you're a community member. It's a valid thought.
Okay, I guess we stand adjourned then. Thank you. If anyone's interested in a tour.